All right, we're good? Good. All right, hello everybody, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our session this afternoon. You're joining us for Harnessing Data Intelligence, what your business is desperately trying to tell you. We're quite excited to have this session here today. My name is Peter MacAskill. I'm the COO at Nova Scotia Business Inc. We just had our Export Achievement Awards. For those of you who saw it, who were there, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, it was wonderful. Follow it on Twitter. We'll get some video out on our social media channels as well. We're really lucky here today to have three wonderful panelists. We've got a data intelligence expert. We've got two wonderful Nova Scotia companies that are here going to tell their stories and about business intelligence, data intelligence, and how they've employed it and used it in their business. How can you predict where and when you need to make change? Should you stay on your current course or not? Your organization is full of data, and we want you to know how to make use of it all. So with us today, in the middle, is Dr. Mike Schmidt. He's the Associate Professor and Acting Associate Dean of Research at the School of Information Management at Dalhousie University. Dr. Mike Schmidt has the enviable and challenging opportunity to conduct research and teach classes around any points where people, information, and technology intersect, putting his 3 degrees in computer science to good use. Right to my immediate left here is Lyndell Findley, cheesemaker with Blue Harbour Cheese. With a particular love of blue cheese and a long-time interest in cheesemaking, Lyndell has developed her technical expertise in modern and traditional artisanal cheesemaking techniques through specialist courses at the University of Vermont Institute for Artisan Cheese, and through several months of hand-on apprenticeship with an award-winning cheesemaker in the U.S. Lyndell founded Blue Harbour Cheese in 2013 and continues to develop traditional European-style blue cheeses at her urban cheese plant in the north end of Halifax. Prior to this, Lyndell spent several years working for the UNHCR Refugee Agency in the conflict zones of Chad, Darfur, Congo, and Myanmar. Originally from Australia, Lyndell immigrated to Canada many years ago, became a citizen, eventually settling in Nova Scotia. You chose right at the end there. That's good. Darren Gallop, on the far left, is co-founder and CEO of Securicy, as well as other tech companies, another tech company maybe he'll talk about. Darren has 20 years experience leading teams and building world-class products. He has led the development of several technologies used to store and process highly confidential information. Darren has a keen sense and ability to design security programs that respect organizational culture and maintain corporate efficiency. So thank you all for joining us here today. I'm going to start off with a very, let's try to get this simplified for us here. Let's get decode the jargon and really give us an idea of what business intelligence, data intelligence means for small business. So Mike, maybe I can ask you to tackle that question for us.
Definitely. If you want something simplified and without jargon, ask a university professor. We were just chatting up here, actually, that I have a pretty good 60-minute definition of business intelligence, but a brief one is harder. I think that if you boil it down to its essence, it's tools and people and strategies that help you unlock value in data to help you make better decisions. But I also think it means different things for different people, right? So if you want to roll out a business intelligence thing, if you want a business intelligence project, what you're going to do at any given company is going to change, right? For some, it's, I should probably keep this data in an Excel spreadsheet instead of on the Post-it notes on my fridge, right? Like, that's a valid business intelligence move to say, I want to start capturing this data better. Another might be, okay, I have all this great data and I'm doing some analysis of it, but I also want to put some of it into the hands of the people who are working with me or for me. And that's another business intelligence move, right? To go to some kind of self-serve. So, a lot of the times when we talk about BI, we talk about, you know, you see a case study about a $15 million implementation project and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't have to be that, right? Business intelligence is just this process for changing a little bit about your attitude from how you consider your data to leveraging it to find value in the data that you're already collecting or could be collecting.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Maybe what I can do is ask Lyndell if you could sort of talk about your business a little bit, and taking what Mike said about how you start to use business intelligence, tell us a little bit about what you've done.
Yes, I'm right there with Mike as regards to the importance of business intelligence, and I found from day one when I started the company that there was a great need for information. I'd just like to say that, firstly, I'm really happy that we have an hour or so, and I don't have to speak as fast as Ross Simons did, because I don't think I could condense it. So I'd like to take a different spin on it, because on the whole concept of data. A cheese manufacturing environment, and I think to a large extent any manufacturing environment, has unique challenges, primarily in the regulatory field. We have a tremendous amount of, in dairy particularly, has a tremendous responsibility to comply at a number of different levels. So keeping data from day one was essential. I fortunately, from many years ago, I won't say how many, I actually started my working life as a computer programmer. So I've always been interested in data. I've always been interested in technology. And that has helped me a lot. When I started this business, I was able to put in place some basic Excel spreadsheets. I still have Post-it notes on the wall too. But the Excel spreadsheet that I developed for myself gives me all of the management information that I need to run the business, or most of it. And everything from the compliance and traceability of the products of production, for sales, of course, tracking my customers, for knowing which market segments that I'm most active in, and where I might need to increase my focus in business. So it also gives me an inventory control. I have this all-in-one spreadsheet, several tabs that link together. It took me a little while to develop that, and I had to get some help with some of the curly formulas that were set up. But that has, for 5 years, that has been my main management information tool. And I suppose we'll
Great.
get on to some of the other questions, but that really is the grounding of where I started.
No, that's great.
From day one, I had to have that.
Yeah, that's good. Now, you started off as a computer programmer.
Yeah.
Is that like a requirement in order to use data intelligence?
No, but it probably helped me. I would say it helped me.
Yeah. Didn't need it for the Post-it notes.
No.
Great, thanks, Lyndell. Darren, how about you? Maybe you can chat a little bit about your business, and in particular, if you have any examples as to where you've used data intelligence, business intelligence.
Yeah, so I have 2 technology companies. Securicy, my latest venture, is an information security management platform that helps small and medium-sized businesses manage cybersecurity compliance. And my first business, Marcato, is an event management platform that's started about 10 years ago and is used by some of the largest events in the world, like Burning Man, Bonnaroo, Coachella, Just for Laughs. And so, you know, when we started Marcato, we operated primarily on competitive intelligence. So again, a little different than, you know, this is more like learning what your competitors are doing, seeing where they're winning, you know, gives much intelligence on what's happening in the environment, a lot of analyzing needs of customers, and then, you know, a lot of gut feeling and sort of these things that work really well in smaller numbers. But then as the company started to grow and get to the point where the number of customers, at one point I could tell you how all the customers were using the platform and what worked and what didn't, and how they, what is their likeliness to renew, and all this type of stuff. But after about 50 customers, you start to lose your ability to do that. Then after like 250 customers, you just have no ability. So I'll tell you, I'll go from a different direction. I'll say sort of the discovery process that we had was learning about and understanding when customers churn. So we develop software. Now, one of the great things about when you have a software development company is you can do a lot of things. You have software developers that can write code. You can process data very effectively if you prioritize that. We started understanding once we would see a customer churn out, we would be able to go back in time and see like, where did this happen, right? Because we do like an annual recurring revenue thing. So let's say their festival happens in July, maybe we renew that account in September. But when we went back and looked at a customer that churned out in September that actually had their festival in July, we could go back and see through the data logs, they actually started deciding that it wasn't going well at like February or March, but we had no idea. So we started very simply understanding, let's take 10 churn customers. What are some common activities or changes in behavior? And since again, the joy of being software is every time somebody logs in, you can measure what they're doing, what they got there with, what tools they're using to do their job. You can get a lot of data really quickly, which typically we don't look at. It just sits in logs somewhere, and you like store it. And maybe someday we'll find a way to use it. But we actually started being able to figure out, right back to months before their festival. So we were able to start developing ways that we could create triggers. So when other customers started to act, these certain identifiable behaviors started to occur, we could use that as a trigger to go in and try to fix it before it totally crashed into the side of a mountain. Whereas before we would be entirely oblivious. Again, when you have 20, 30, 40, 50 customers, you can maintain this on a very analog way. Once you get to a certain number, the cost of maintaining and using this data in a meaningful way, because this is not just one or two things. It's not just did they log in or not, because like then all of a sudden, the day after the festival when they go on break for a week, everybody stops logging in, and it's like, oh my God, we're losing the customer. Better call them. It's like, why are you calling my phone? I'm on vacation. So you had to start really like being able to quantify these things and come up with like ways that you don't have false positives. And what I mean by false positive is like the alarm goes on, but there's no fire. If that happens enough, then there'll be a fire. The alarm goes on, you're like, damn, it's probably a rat or my cat or something, and then the fire happens, right? So, that was how we discovered it in Mercado in terms of the churn. We even went further back to start looking at habits in the sales cycle. So can we identify traits or in the way of an operation runs, or traits in the way the sales cycle operated, so that we could identify a problematic customer in advance of putting that effort in to try to win them over, and then win them through that first year and to reduce them into a non-churning customer. And then that it was able to affect how we identify opportunities. And so at one point in time, we used to just, if anyone went to the website, I'd be like, oh, like, hi, what can we do? Everything you can to get these customers. And then we started qualifying leads, understanding the difference between a tire kicker and somebody who's actually has a problem, has the budget to be able to do something about that problem, and is likely going to statistically meet a fit for your product or your business. So then again, like you think about like trying to be cost effective, you need to reduce your cost of acquisition. So if you spend an hour on the phone with every single person who jumps on your website, that might not be a great practice in return. So that was in Mercado. Now, in starting a new company, having grown up a little bit and learned a few things over the years of doing this, we've taken a very data-driven approach right from the beginning. In fact, we actually used other data from other sources to decide to do the company in the first place. So we were looking at, what are the trends, and so in one of the pieces of data I love when you're trying to innovate, and typically when you're innovating, if you're doing it at the right time, the need for what you're doing isn't totally blossomed yet. So you're trying to predict a future need. So we were looking at what happened in regions where privacy law became more strict, and how were businesses affected, and what types of demands did that create. And Australia is actually a great example, because Australia has implemented one of the earlier countries in the developed world to implement this concept of the government getting involved in protecting the privacy of citizens. And then, now everybody talks about the GDPR, I'm sure you've all heard of, but we saw these things coming, and there's many more coming that nobody even realizes, or most people don't think of, and understanding that, we were predicting a spike in demand amongst small businesses for something 2 years ago no one gave a shit about. And so now it's happening, and we're like at a point now where we use other intelligence and other data that was mined by other sources like Gartner and whatnot, and looked at that and applied it to a sector, and now we're seeing that sector get hit with this high demand. So we use it as a predictive tool to figure out, okay, well, if we can get 2 years ahead of this becoming a gold mine, and we can get ourselves established with product and solutions and processes to solve the problem. So now we're super obsessed about it, and we're using it in every way possible. And we track everything that anybody does when they come to any of our web assets. Of course, legally with nice, clear privacy policies that are compliant with PIPEDA and GDPR and all of these regulatory environments.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, it's, I'm hearing compliance across from everyone, but it's really interesting to hear how you saw compliance as an opportunity. So this is coming down the pipe. How can you take advantage of it? I wonder, Mike, if you can sort of add to what we're seeing, these trends, the global trends, and how it might be impacting. We've got people here who are thinking, GDPR, what is this? And these new what new other markets are coming up with.
And Lyndell also saw compliance as an opportunity, right? I have to collect this data anyway in order to market my product, but while I'm collecting it, what other information can I gain from it? So compliance on the privacy security front is very much a big one. The cybersecurity more broadly, right, around if the big banks are being compromised, what can a small business do to defend themselves from that? That's a scary one. We're seeing a big push around environmental and sustainability, carbon tax coming, right? Those are things where there's challenges on the compliance side, but also opportunities to say, okay, if I need to have a better understanding of this, how can I also leverage that understanding to say, how do I make my business? How do I allow myself to scale my business? How do I, and so on. So it is, I would say, scary and exciting times.
No, that's great. So Lyndell or Darren, or maybe both, was there an aha moment where you realized, wait a second? So Darren, you mentioned, you can do it sort of one by one up to a certain amount, and then all of a sudden it's like, hold on, that's too many clients to really keep a track on. Did it come organically from within the organization? How did you make that switch?
Yeah, it was entirely organically within the organization. I mean, even really from the beginning, we had this concept of a customer dashboard, so you could have a really good understanding of a customer. But we over-engineered it and made this big thing, and then when we actually had customers, we didn't have the time or overhead to maintain this overly engineered dashboard. So it kind of went to where a lot of what were thought to be good ideas go to die, and deep inside the bowels of your code base. I mean, I think generally when you're in an environment where you're around software developers all the time and you're building software, I mean, you're basically dealing with data all the time, so that it's pretty creative. Like as soon as we're like, hey, we have a problem, we had a really bad churn right this year, and we've gone through in an analog way to assess, what was the churn issue caused by, and then understand that, and then started to think just internally about, well, where could we have seen that? Like how do we do that? I mean, you can't call your customers every week and be like, hi, just seeing how you're doing, checking in. Stop calling me, this is weird. Yeah. So, we start figuring out things really organically, right? And then once sometimes less is more. And so you start something, you come up with, you build like your spreadsheet. I'm sure your spreadsheet started off as one thing, and then over time, you keep iterating on that spreadsheet, and then you forget I know we have some spreadsheets, and I'm like, if that page breaks, I quit, because I don't remember how I did that. It was too long ago, and things evolve, and you do have people that come in and within your team that give you insight and help. And there's so much to read on the internet, and there's so many great books, and all this stuff can inspire. And I think start small, get something actionable, pick a smaller number of things to do well, and actually nail them, and then add things. I think we over-engineered most of the things initially, kind of hey, this is going to be the best thing ever. And then it's 5 months in, and we have nothing to work with, and time goes by. So I think, really starting with an idea, what is our goals and what data you typically know your business really well, and your employees know your business. So if you have that open conversation, I think engaging the team, then you're gonna hear things that specifically as a CEO you may not see. Who's the person who's talking to customers on a regular basis? Who's the person who's selling? And then when deals close, why did they close versus why did they not close? Mm-hmm. And then start to understand those things and have that communication. And I think most of the time, the data you need becomes really blatantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that did happen with my company too. Because at the beginning, I was just that one person that was doing all of those things. Almost from the beginning, I actually have been sponsoring interns from Mount St. Vincent University who are dietetics students studying to be dietitians. And it was clear that they were coming in, I had to train them. And I also had to make sure that they understood what I was trying to achieve with the business so that they could help to collect the data and so on, and to understand the importance of that data. So I had my spreadsheet. The first thing that I needed to do was actually bill people, I had to send an invoice. So this little spreadsheet started out as a way to just track my sales. Yes, I've sold this customer this much cheese, it costs this much, this date. Simple as that, just a record-keeping system. And it did grow from there, but it grew very quickly. One of the things that is really critical in food processing is traceability. And I needed to link my cheeses to where they were going when they went out the door. So I had to link my cheese production into the customer so that every sale had to be linked to this customer got this much of that batch of cheese on this date. So if there was, heaven forbid, a recall, which, touch wood, I haven't had yet, I would know exactly where that batch of cheese went, who got it, when they got it, and if I needed to bring back, So really critical information for me from the beginning. But I built on that to say, okay, well, I've got these customers and I can get on the phone and talk to them, because being the licensing of cheese processing is provincial and there's federal. So I started out with a provincial license. So that meant that my market was Nova Scotia. And that meant, as it was mentioned by several people during the lunch, there's less than 1 million people here. And for a high-end cheese product, 99% of them are in Halifax. So it's pretty easy for me to get around and see my customers, to visit new restaurants, visit new stores, and talk about the cheese. And I loved that. It was wonderful. But now I'm growing. Now I'm looking out of province. Now I won't be able to sit down with my customers and say, hey, what are you doing with the cheese? I'm going to be selling through distributors. I am already selling through distributors. I don't get to talk to the customer anymore. I mean, the distributor is my customer.
Right.
So I need a whole other level of data now that I didn't need at the beginning. And I'm finding, when I started to think about this panel actually and what I wanted to say and what the data actually meant to me, I thought, okay, well, there's internal data and then there's external data. And it became very clear that there were two different sets of data that I needed. where I fit into the big picture data that your companies can gather off the internet and everywhere else. And then the data that I have within the company that I need to capture in terms of how I can grow the business. So, you know, I've had help from Nova Scotia Business with data market intelligence, research on markets for the growth of the business.
Great.
And I've had from the Trade Commission Services also, from the Canadian embassies in different places. They also provide a lot of research. So I've been trying to find a way to bring all this together and make sense out of it.
Good.
And I'm not sure I'm entirely making sense out of it yet, but I know that information is really important.
So
It's a good common driver there, right, of change, right? And there's a scale piece, right, as you have more customers or more employees that you need to make data explicit, and lots of positive change, right? So those are both good things. There's a negative change where you're starting to lose more customers than you're used to, and that can drive it. There's other positive change, like undertaking some kind of other digital transformation. Maybe you want to start selling online. Maybe you want to use Amazon as a distribution channel. And all of a sudden you're getting data in very different ways than you used to, and you have to adapt to making decisions because you see all of the information about your company, to making decisions based on data because that's the best view you have of your company, because it's just too big to keep in your head. And that's a big challenge. Another type of change that's maybe positive, maybe negative is adoption of devices. So I grew up on a dairy farm in Nova Scotia, and now a lot of dairy farms are moving to robotic milking systems. And that's a completely different way of understanding your core business, is by having it presented to you as a form of data instead of you seeing the cows every morning, right? And that's a very big driver around the decision to undertake data intelligence is, oh crap, now I have this data and I don't understand my company as well as I used to because I'm seeing it through this different lens, and so I need to do something.
great, yeah. So Mike, your bio talks about any points where people, information, and technology intersect. And I think that's a good illustration of that, where you're starting to see, you talked about the various points where this data is coming at you. Lyndell, you talked about both compliance and linking that to sales and how you start to make that. The other thing that we've talked about here is this sort of growth, the scaling model of companies. So you go from the Post-it notes to the Excel, and then eventually, maybe you need to pivot and go a step further. Is there a point there, like again, like what advice can we give people here as they make that change?
Don't leave Excel before you're ready to, right? If honestly, the best tool for data intelligence is the one that you understand really well until that one doesn't work anymore. And when that one doesn't work anymore, then you have that motivation to go out and find the next one. And there's a ton of offerings. My guess right now is if you search for data intelligence small business in Google, you'll scroll through 7 pages of ads before you even see the first search result. Because I think that there's a recognition that there's a lot of attention being paid to this subject. And so a lot of the big people who used to not consider sales under 6 figures are now looking at offerings tailored to smaller organizations, small, medium-sized businesses, to try to put the tools in people's hands. And there was a time when you needed a person at your company dedicated to analytics who had a deep understanding of statistics and programming to use some of these tools, and we're seeing those days go by too, right? So, without endorsing...
That went quick.
What's that?
That went quick.
Without endorsing any particular tools, right? There's a ton of tools that are the next step beyond Excel, where they've adopted some of the same kind of ways of looking at data, so they're familiar, but are also trying to give you more powerful tools, ranging... Tableau is one that you hear a lot. Lumira from SAP, IBM, and Cognos are in the space, right? So there's a lot of these big enterprise providers that are saying, we'd actually like to give you a tool that's affordable and manageable, right, and built on skills you already have.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's consistent with the message you mentioned too, Darren. Don't over-engineer, start small.
Yeah, because, you know, like when you sit down and think about what's important, you start listing everything you can possibly think of that could be important. That can be a dangerous task. Like what are the most valuable things, and focus on getting them going, and you'll have results quicker. Like, you know, I've used tools before, like there's one called Clipfolio that's out of Toronto that's similar to sort of focused more on small, medium business. And basically, like, everything is already happening or most things are happening in the internet. Like if you're using Salesforce or HubSpot to manage your marketing and your sales activity, and you're using like QuickBooks Online or Xero or something like that to manage your accounting, and then you've got like Freshdesk or some sort of customer support thing. You have all these individual silos of certain tools that essentially are tracking a whole bunch of critical information, and each one of those has their dashboards and their reports. And you know, often in small businesses, you'll see like the salespeople are like focused on the Salesforce report, and the people on the customer service are focusing on and then what is the CEO? What are you, as a business owner or the CEO, what are you looking at? And like, I think the reason why this is becoming more popular is it's becoming more scalable and it's easier. Like all of these tools have APIs so that data can be pushed through to, you know, so that the CEO can look at dashboards that are like, what's happening, like churn in real time. Don't find out that your like churn went down, got flushed, you know, went down really bad 6 months later. Like seeing stuff in real time and having something that's simple enough to view it, that you can actually view it often. You know, looking at KPIs once every quarter is not a very safe way of running your business, because you may have missed 3 months of opportunity to solve a problem that could have, you know, fairly significant effect on your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I think it needs to be addressed a lot is the compatibility of all these different softwares that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because most of them don't talk to each other. And to be able to link some of those, I mean, even linking my accounting system that I use, a Sage accounting system, with data from my spreadsheet, you know, and my bank information from online banking. Just those three things, trying to link those, I just don't, you know.
Yeah.
Some systems link to your bank online, some don't, you know. And you can waste a huge amount of time just trying to have them look the same, you know, have them in the same format.
Yeah.
And you need to have them in the same format if you're, for example, applying for grants, applying for loans, having to put together a business plan proposal to the bank. They want to see just a nice format of your last 5 years of data, or your last 3, or your future projections. You can't get that without a huge amount of manual manipulation of data these days, but I think it's getting better. It's going towards a more integrated approach, and not before time, I think.
Yeah.
It really needs to. Because even when you're small, you need to do that, you know.
Yeah.
And even at that first growth step,
Yeah.
you need to be able to quickly put that data together in a way that other people can make sense of as well.
Yeah. No, it's great to hear that. I mean, a lot of times you hear SAP, it's like run and hide. It's supposed to just be huge and expensive type thing. So it's good to hear that there are solutions out there for the small business owner as well. So we've heard a bit about some mistakes that you could do. So, you know, overbuilding, or maybe going too fast, too quick, and you know, concentrating too much on things that are 3 months old, because that's, you know, history at that point in time. But if you're starting off on this, a lot of people will, you know, they'll say, I've got you know, I got a customer issue I have to deal with. I have to do this. I don't have time to look at the data type thing. So what types of barriers have you seen in your business, and how have you overcome them, and how have you prioritized to make sure that you're looking at the right things?
So I just went through the Techstars Accelerator in Boston, and they really emphasize, and a lot of the businesses there are super early stage, like a lot of them are pre-revenue. And even when you're pre-revenue, there's like metrics that you could be following. So one of the things that they do there is every Monday at 4 o'clock, everybody presents their KPIs, their key performance indicators. They can be everything from, it could be churn, it could be customer adoption. It could be commits that your developers make on product. It could be your funnel, your conversions. It could be anything. Typically, like a number like between 3 and 5 of them are a great starting point. So if you make it really complicated, then you're likely not going to do it every week. And if you don't do it every week, and then you might as well not have it, and then you've sort of defeated the purpose. So, the whole idea of having people to be accountable to is a great too. So when you like I send out for Securicy, I send out an update to our investors every month, and in that month there's our KPIs, and there is how many new customers did we add, how many did we say we were like, what did we budget adding, and what does that look like, and even like doing it graphically. So instead of being like we did this much that last month and this much this month, like being able to show like what did the last 6 months look like, what is the trajectory. So if your churn is going up, that's pretty indicative. If you say, oh, our churn is 20%, well, is that high or low? I don't know. It depends on your industry or your product. If your churn last year was 10 and your churn this year is 20, then that's telling you that you need to peel off a few more layers of that onion and figure out a little bit more what's going on there. If it's the same, then there's at least consistency. If you're improving it, then that can be feedback to some activity that you've done and try to link that to, right? So, I think the way to make it palatable and manageable is to pick a small set of data, figure out a way to easily be able to compile that data or efficiently compile that data and review it every week, and at the bare minimum every month. And now what we do internally with our KPIs is we actually share the KPIs with the whole team. So now you've created a point of accountability. Your team is expecting. So if I show them the KPIs every Monday for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden I don't on 1 week,
why didn't Darren's not measuring stuff anymore?
So I think accountability. You don't want to become it's really easy as a CEO or the entrepreneur to like constantly be dictating where you spend your time by the demands of the outside world. So your inbox and all of these things that create senses of urgency, or the loud customer who's screaming over the phone. That could just be that customer is an ass. And that you are taking it like you're not using numbers, you're not using metrics. Like you can go down the rabbit hole of over servicing one customer who's illogical and not really a great customer, and then thinking everything's great because the other customers aren't calling, screaming at you. Right. But because you're not looking at the numbers, you're blinded and you're getting emotionally caught up in the fact that somebody's confronting you on it, and you're allowing that external person that is not a stakeholder in your business to actually dictate your activities and your actions. Yeah. I think it's really critical that you look at the whole holistic. Again, 5, 10, 15, 20 customers, you can sort of manage this without systems. At a certain point, you can't. So you need that way of understanding. You don't want to get distracted down one problem that's loud, the loud problems, and then all of a sudden realize that for a year we've been losing money on an entire product. Well, how did we? Well, because we weren't measuring that. We weren't measuring the time for onboarding. We weren't capturing the cost of acquisition in our accounting and narrowing that down per customer. And the reality is like there are a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of options when you pick like what are you using for your CRM, what are you using for your marketing automation, for your customer support, for your accounting. Pick softwares that are current, that have the ability to do the things that you need to do. So, don't be, and I know it's like, it's hateful to change software, but, there's so much that goes out. If you sign up for something like AppSumo, you'll see like every week there's like 50 new pieces of software that come out that do really cool things. And I think you want to keep an eye on that. Again, you don't want to be changing software all the time, but you need to find ways to simplify it. Like, and then in my new company, it is so much cleaner than my old company because we were just like, okay, we went with HubSpot for everything because HubSpot is not great at anything. They do it all. Mm-hmm. And that means that without a whole bunch of like, when people say on their website they integrate with other things, that can mean something different to the customer than it actually is. Right. And so like, we made a choice to have a tool that's say a B tool, not an A or an A+ tool at any of the one given things, but it's simplified and gave us the ability to track the customer from randomly hitting our website to responding to a campaign to coming through a nurturing a nurturing campaign, to now being a sales qualified lead, and to now being a customer, and now wandering through the journey of being a user of our platform. So
Great.
you have all that intel, and and I'm not in any way saying, go buy HubSpot. I'm just saying as an example, I actually hate the thing. I find it super hard to use. And thankfully I have employees that can use it and have way more patience than I do. But I love that I can see this result, which is I can see that journey. So if I'm going to jump on a call with a customer like I am tomorrow, I can go see like, oh, that customer was introduced to us by Brian back in Boston, and they came on this, and they are paying this much, and this is how many support tickets they have, and here's how they're talking, like everything, right? And then to be able to pull back and then from all that data compile really simple KPIs and look at them on a regular basis.
Okay.
And by creating official things, like when I say to my founders and my investors, like, you're going to get an investor update every month, and it's going to have KPIs, and my staff's going to see this every week, and me and my co-founder are going to look at that. Now I have all these people that I'm accountable to. So it keeps me like on track. Like I said it was important, it is important. We all collectively agree it's important. And now we're going to look at this stuff together. And when you look at it together, you'll have people that'll come up with ideas that you didn't say, hey, how come every time this goes up, this goes down?
Right.
Whoa, never knew that. What does that mean? And you learn, right? Like and this is why the tech stores mentality of like doing this right from the beginning, even before even when you're a pre-revenue company, is it's like when you track things and you watch them, you see how they evolve. And then if you decide you've been tracking one thing for 6 months and you're like, I don't really know if this is an important thing, great, stop tracking it. Put something else that's more important in there. That's all the process of learning.
Great.
Yeah, this is really critical, I find, that your employees understand what you're doing with the data as well, because you're relying on them. I have one employee now, and my interns, so it's sort of I've moved up 100% in the employment scale. They're the ones that are keeping the raw data. They're the ones that on the day-to-day they're tracking. They're making some cheese, so they're recording what they've done, or they're taking an order from a customer on the phone, so they have to keep track of that. I always make sure they understand the importance of keeping that up to date. If it's not current, it's not useful. And so by having a simple spreadsheet, they can just put that in on a daily basis. And then when I need, when Stats Canada send me an email and say, hey, we want your statistics on how much milk you've used this month, how much cheese inventory you've got, I just open my spreadsheet to that summary page, and it's all there because everything has linked into it. But if the employees or your staff don't understand what that piece of data they're putting in is doing, then your system falls apart a bit. So I find that it's really good to engage everybody in the importance of it. And the spreadsheet that I have tells me, just by organizing it in a certain way at the beginning, can tell me whether all my customers are, whether they're food service, whether they're retail, what percentage of sale each customer is of the retail or of the food service, or what their percentage of total sales for that customer. I have one major supermarket chain, and they're not, I can track all the individual stores, but I also need to see what that whole company is in terms of my customers. Are they 5% or are they 90%? I need to know that. So it's all just there in front of me, because when I do the invoices, it just gets logged into that other sheet. So it's a simple approach, but it's quite sophisticated to set it up at the beginning. But it's really important to take the time. I found very important to take the time to set it up in the beginning, so that otherwise you have no clue where you're going, no clue what your business is doing, and then when you get these requests, you're always putting out fires. You're always running to do this, running to do that, because you haven't thought of that before. But if you put all those links in place at the beginning, then it's just all there nicely.
So really important that you start from the beginning when it comes to
Day
this.
one.
Start it from day one, even pre-revenue, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
Darren.
yeah.
So the other thing you introduced here is being able to show it to your staff, to stakeholders, to your owners, different things like that. So are there visualization tools? We hear about dashboards, graphs, colors, different schematics, that sort of thing. What have you seen, or what's worked for you, or maybe what hasn't worked for you within your businesses, or what you've seen?
It's funny, the origin of the term dashboard is from horse-drawn carriages. So the horse would be running along a path that was mostly mud and, if I can be crude, horse shit. And the dashboard was there to stop all that from flying off the horse's hooves into your face. And now we've evolved the term so the horse shit is on the monitor right in front of you.
Right. Or at least it's
Still in your face. Still in your face.
So you throw that back to your sales team.
I'll defer to my colleagues to give a serious answer to your question.
Oh, I like that one.
It's easy to make dashboards that don't actually present you with meaningful information that actually helps you, right? So to go back to your biggest mistakes thing, if we go all the way back to the definition where I said it was people and strategies and tools, I think the answer is really touched on all three of those, right? You need your people to be ready for this. And sometimes that people is you, and sometimes that people is your employees, right? But they need to be ready to work with the data. You do need the right tools in place, but the strategy piece, you have to know what you're measuring. And whether you present that in the form of a dashboard, whether you present that as a daily email that you get with just some numbers in it, however you get that, make sure it's something that actually is communicating something of value. So if you're, producing maple syrup, I can give you a device that will measure the sap output of every tree that you're tapping, and will measure the pounds per square inch of the vacuum pump, and will try to do some prediction on what class of syrup is going to be produced. And I can go, is that actually going to help you? Is that where you need business intelligence? I don't actually know, right? Maybe the time is better invested in customer perspectives on pure maple syrup versus corn syrup with the word maple on the cover, right? So I don't know, right? And I think the biggest part of data intelligence is marrying this domain expertise with the technical tools and the data literacy piece to say, here is where I can find value in the data. And that I think is what I see fail, especially in medium-sized businesses, is this belief that once I write the check to SAP or once I write the check to Tableau, I'm doing data intelligence. That adoption of the tool is sufficient, and it's really, I would say, the least important part relative to the other two.
I would agree with that. Definitely, it's how you use the information, and if you don't know where to look, or you don't know what that tool is going to give to you, then you might as well not have it. Certainly, you might as well not pay for it. Yeah, I got to have a look at my notes, because I kind of did a bit of brainstorming with myself on this, and I thought I'll forget some important things maybe. But so I think I mentioned at the beginning that the data can help you with external growth in your company, and also with the internal. And I've mentioned a lot about the internal, which has been really important, and that was production control, business performance, sales data, benchmarking of how we're traveling with compared to last year, what percentage of sales this month compared to the same time last year, or that sort of thing. I can do all that. It also helps me in targeting new customers. If I can see that, last year I had 60% retail sales, retail customers, and this year it's dropped down to 35. What's happened there? Am I not paying enough attention to the retail, or am I not paying enough attention to my chefs? I mean, you talk about giving so much attention to the loud customers. I worry most about the quiet customers, the ones you don't hear, because for me, I found out very early on that from my spreadsheet I could see, this restaurant is buying cheese every month at more or less at this level, and then suddenly, for the last 3 months they haven't, or the last 2 months they haven't. What's happened there? And I found that almost every single time you pick up the phone and you call, the chef has moved. You know, the chefs move around incredibly, and so now I get all their cell phone numbers so I can follow them. So, when the chef goes to the next restaurant, that's my next new customer.
Right.
You know, so I mean these are just things that are unique probably to my particular business, but the targeting, the spreadsheets help me to target that. The compliance, I get inspected when the inspectors come. I get inspected by provincial. I get inspected by CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, federal. I have to send cheese to the lab every month. They send me a list at the beginning of every year of when they want me to send samples. When the inspectors come, they want to see all those records. Well, it's all there. So internally, I run on data. It's critical. But now that I'm growing the business, what products can I introduce that are going to be useful in the market, that is not going to cut out my very small pool of competitor cheesemakers in Nova Scotia? There are only 8 of us. You know, so I don't want to produce a new product that's going to directly compete and cut out someone else. So we try to collaborate. So information helps to give me this, what are the trends, you know, are people buying more artisan cheese? Are they buying more high-end cheese? Do they want more craft slices? You know, everything is about data, and I just can't see going forward without this information. You know? So I guess they're the main points that I had really identified.
So you touched on a point there of using your own data and then combining that with publicly available data and those different touch points out there. Do you find, and what kind of advice can you give people on, you know, is it difficult to do that? Is that a task that's, you know, you're foolhardy to get into, or is it something that's so valuable that you need to get into it? And then maybe are there, you know, time-honored, easy ways to do that?
No, I think it's not foolish. You have to. Otherwise, you're just guessing.
Yeah.
You know, you have to know what market you're moving into, or you say, okay, I love to make X type of cheese. Well, fine, you can make it, but will anyone buy it? You know, and if I'm selling out of province, well, who else is making that type of cheese in another province? I mean, yeah, I could sell in Quebec, but, well, you know, there are hundreds of cheesemakers in Quebec. So maybe I shouldn't bother wasting my time marketing in Quebec. I should try somewhere else where there are not so many cheesemakers, you know. And all of this data is available through research that you can easily get for free by tapping into to different organizations who specialize in that. You can pay for it, or you can, and you can pay even like Google Analytics and things like that. Well, I don't know how much that would help me, but I think other people swear by it. You know, that's the best data that they can get. You know, so I think it's just, you've got to look and know a bit what's out there, and then see what applies to your business and what doesn't.
Yeah.
You know.
Darren, Mike, comment on
I mean, it's definitely very unique to every business, and what you're trying to target, and what your goals are, and even the tools or the resources you would access are super unique to what you're trying to do. I mean, I look at external data and internal data as separate data sets, so I'm not too worried about like finding a programmatic way of integrating external data and internal data. External data, we use external data to assess market growth, and we usually tap into other resources to do that. Internal data is how well are we taking advantage of the opportunities that we see. That's sort of how we see it, and you know, we don't try not to over-engineer everything.
Yeah.
And kind of create ways like, if this could just be on one dashboard, Or I could just click on the other one, go back and forth, and save a whole bunch of time and headaches trying to make them talk to each other. Right. So, you know.
Good. Mike, do you see anything sort of in the academic world around that?
If I knew a general answer for integrating external data sources into your operations, I think I'd be Skyping in from my yacht in the Harbour, because I think that's what everyone wants, right? They want the turnkey solution to what do I need to bring in to give me the insight I need, but sadly it's not that easy. It is what is the data that's available to you, and I think just highlighting that there's a growing amount of open data that's available, and some of that may be relevant. Many of it probably isn't, and finding those pieces is worth doing. So, you know, once a year, find your open data catalog and take a look and see if there's something that's relevant to your sector. Different industries have different data sets that are not even part of the open data thing. Dairy would be a good example of that, where we have the Canadian dairy information. What is it?
Supply management.
Well, because we have supply management in a highly regulated and food safety assured regimen, we have incredible amounts of data at the provincial and federal level about that industry, right? And that data is out there, and that varies by industry. And then looking internationally, right? There's all kinds of organizations collecting data, and a lot of it's for sale. Often there are organizations like NSBI who will help with access to some market data. Trade commissioners, I think you mentioned them as well, who provide this kind of intelligence. And you know, it's one of those things where it's important to some degree for some people, which is as weaselly a sentence I think as I can construct. But it's not, to me, it's not as essential as your internal data, right? That you can't ignore the outside world, but in order to make the best use of that external data, you need to have a very good understanding of what you're doing inside. It's wonderful to know that there's a market for, you know, 1 million liters of maple syrup in this market, but if you don't have the capacity to produce that, what do you care?
Right. Yeah, that's.
I think another concern now too, with all like the expansion of the definition of personally identifiable information and the explosion of privacy law legislation everywhere around the world that's happening, is that you actually now have to have clarity and permission in most cases to collect data on people. So like even like, you know how like you're searching something on the internet and then all of a sudden it's like, I was looking at a lawnmower yesterday, or like, and now everywhere I go I just see lawnmowers constantly, or we were talking about a lawnmower in the car and now, is this weird? So, I mean, technically, like they used to be sort of the wild, wild west, and as technology, all these ways of tracking data and all these ways of like target marketing and stuff like sort of blew up out of nowhere. And now the legislation is coming out and saying, well, like if you have if your privacy policy says, hey, we use your data for X, Y, Z, and then we store it here, and then we do that, and then all of a sudden now you're going to use a new log monitoring tool that's going to analyze customer activity and formulate some sort of KPI indicators for it. You now technically, in a lot of legislations, need to go back to your privacy policy now and change your privacy policy to say, now we also use this service to do this, and this is why we're doing it. So like I think everything that when you're really starting to track your customer base inside your own, in your like your internal data, your customers, even your prospects, there's a lot of legal considerations and a lot of security considerations that you now have to take into consideration, which you didn't all that long ago really have to worry too much about. And then not just on the legal side, but what happens often when the legal world puts an emphasis on something, like for example privacy, then there's becomes a social belief around that. So like, you know, everybody is, where before it was like, well, that's just business, you're tracking me, whatever, whether you think it's good or not. But now that like there's been all this talk about like that user owns that data, they should have the right, and you know, it's not acceptable to just grab a bunch of emails and fire them in some random application and then send a blast email to 10,000 people. And Like, you know, and now it's not just delete, it's like, people get mad at you now. People are like, that's an asshole move. And like, so the awareness that comes with all this talk of privacy and security of information has created a heightened awareness. So you can, like, activities that were perfectly normal that people did commonly a couple of years ago will actually likely do you more harm than good now.
Right.
Like, it is just, you date yourself and you look like you're completely a Luddite when you go and you send a BCC'd email to 20,000 people that definitely didn't sign up for your email list.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
those things are not acceptable. And so I think, like, as you start tracking data, and it's important to track data, you just need to be very, you know, legally speaking in this country, if you are tracking the data of anybody, you need to have a privacy officer in your organization, somebody who is conducting some level of a data protection assessment or risk assessment on what are we tracking it, why are we tracking it, what are we doing to protect it so it's only being used in its purpose that we've determined it for, and make sure that that doesn't get out there, because large sets of data are great, but the larger your set of data and the more granular your set of data, the more risk you are exposed if something is to happen bad to that data. So I think that has to be considered when you're using tools and when you're collecting information in general.
Yeah, that's a great point. We often take clients into the European market, and when we go in, you start to meet people and you hand out business cards and stuff, and they put you on, you know, lists and stuff, but it immediately follows up with asking for permission in order to stay on these. So you start getting, you know, email after email of people asking this, and it is really important. Thank you for that, Darren. It's and it can also, if you're not following those rules, it can be quite punitive on what the penalties are. So it's important. I think, Mike, you gave a little plug to NSBI. We often do have little information sessions, and we'll bring in experts on things like privacy and where to help you with that. And I think we might have something planned at some point in the future on that. And if we
Darren to come and do it, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Just on that subject, right? What we've seen in the past with privacy and security pushes is Europe is a bellwether for what is going to happen in North America. So Europe had the data protection directive, and then what, 6 years later, Canada enacted PIPEDA, right? And the U.S. is finally getting serious about some sort of federal legislation, but there's a lot of state level stuff, and so certainly if you're even if you're not thinking about getting into a European market, odds are that this is going to become a more something that you have to pay more attention to in the future. Not that I want to go too far from data intelligence, the point of it, but definitely be aware that you know, right now when you sign into your online banking, your service that you're paying for from your bank, they're doing everything they can in the background to try to identify you and connect you to your online profile. Do you have a Facebook account? Do you have a Twitter account? Do you use Snapchat? Whatever, trying to connect to as much information as they can gain about you, and to improve their marketing of products to you, right? And that's a form of data intelligence, and I believe we're going to start seeing more pushback against that in the coming years.
Yeah, I think it's important for businesses to understand eyes wide open on this, but it also underscores the point that the panel made earlier, and start early on tracking this. And if you've got a good system tracking it, and you're very vigilant in the way that you're using that data, then you'll easily be able to fit into whatever these laws and regulations come down the road. And Jessica, who spoke up, if you don't know Jessica, is with NSBI. We've also got Amanda Sparks, who's with NSBI. Karen is also with NSBI, and Nadia over here. One of the things, Jessica, the name of the panel, or the name of this discussion, so, you know, harnessing data intelligence, what is your business desperately trying to tell you? And I think we talked a fair bit about that today, where, you know, it's not the screaming client necessarily who's giving you the real good information, but the data is screaming things at you, and it's trying to let you know things. And one of the questions I have for the panel on that is, okay, have you found it both ways, where I've got a question, so I go and try to find the data in order to answer the question, or do you find it more the other way around, where the data is telling me something and now I need to move on it?
or both.
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 Okay.
Both. I couldn't. I saw that question, and I really thought about that. Well, you know, you of course you have the questions,
Yes.
and that's informs what track you go down in trying to find out the answers. But from well, my point of view, and probably most of the manufacturing businesses, you need to have data from day one, and for all of those reasons we talked about, compliance and so on. So actually just on, it's a little bit off the topic of data, but the procedures and standards are something that I also had to put in place very early on, and I was, because of having a rotating pool of interns coming through, I needed to have procedures that I could give them so they know, to have a consistency. And I think the consistency is really important. But what I find now is if you want to go into the area of compliance with food safety, for example. In food safety, there are several different systems that can be applied to tracking food safety. Each has its set of procedures. And then, for example, the federal government, the CFIA, had a set of procedures for documenting your food safety procedures if you wanted to be federally licensed. So you do that. And then now there's a new Food Act being brought in, and the new Food Act comes with a new set of guidelines, which are similar to the old ones, but not. So then you need to have your data, you need to correlate the two. What's the old system and how does it relate to the new system? And then you're going into the US market, and they have their own food safety system. It's the same set of regulations, but different, and in a different format. And you're constantly trying to correlate one to the other, and you know all the data is there, but you've got to have it in a different format to talk to each different agency. That's something that, if someone could come up with a nice bit of software that would do that. I mean, we've done it manually. Okay, this is the coding system for CFIA, and this is the coding system for the new regulations. So we just had to go through and put it in manually, which is extremely tedious and time-consuming, and fraught with all kinds of errors too, because it's just such a detailed thing. A perfect job for a piece of software, really, but you know, it'd have to be fairly specialized to do that, I suppose. So you know, it's all links to the whole data intelligence, as far as I'm concerned, is how you can make a better use of technology to make your life easier in the business and save time. So.
Anyone else, anything to add on sort of how the data screams at you versus the question?
I think both, but probably more data for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess I have a bit of a larger team, and I'm not in the front, I'm not in the field, like front-facing as much as I used to, so I'm relying on the data as my primary.
Right.
I think as you grow and you're less hands-on, the data is the one that's really, you know, telling you what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, back to that question of scale and
Yeah.
how the scale works in your business.
Totally.
Yeah.
What I see fairly often is trying to find an answer to a question in data is the gateway drug to looking at your data to find what it might be trying to tell you, right? That once you say, oh shoot, there is value in this data, that's kind of that kick that you need to go, oh, maybe I should be making better use of this data even when I don't have a burning question.
Right.
Yeah.
It's good. Good. So are there any, speaking of burning, any burning pieces of advice that you'd like to give those who are with us here today when it comes to harnessing your data intelligence or using it effectively within their business?
I think I said most of the things
covered
that
it,
I would
yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Start now, start small.
Yeah.
Think of the more critical things, build from there, look
Yeah.
at it often, share it with everybody.
Yeah, that's
Hold
what
your-
I.
Be held accountable.
People and tools.
People and tools. It's also can be used as a motivational tactic with your team as well. They started getting ownership. People to get have ownership in certain KPIs. You've got, your devs have their KPIs and their goals, and you've got your marketing and your sales, and one team's doing really well at hitting their goals, one isn't.
Yeah.
You don't have to then be the one who's like, you're not hitting your goals. They just sit there and feel horrible about it and go home and think about what they're going to do to perform better next week, and that competition, and not engage people and by quantifying what their goals are and quantifying the team's ability to actually hit those goals versus having like a qualitative thing, which we often, oh, you guys did really good, like you're always here, you're working really hard. Well, I mean, if you're here at 9 a.m. or you sleep in every morning, but you're hitting your KPIs really well, sleep in. See, clearly sleep is helping you perform.
It ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
No, I do think that the starting early, starting small is really the key, because if you wait until your business has grown, you don't have time to go back and set these things up. But if you've set them up in a small way, it's easy to just enhance them as you go along. And you just don't want to be putting out fires all the time, but redoing everything over and over and over again. So get the system set up, and you think you haven't got time at the beginning, but take the time and step back and do the planning. It'll pay dividends over and over, I think, and it has for me.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of technology. That's another thing. Understand it and use it.
That's probably a really good point as far as embracing technology and understanding how it can be a tool for you rather than being scared of it. Mike, a university professor, always has pearls of wisdom that they want to continue to add on.
No, not in this case.
Good luck.
Best of luck to you. No, I mean, they hit the nail right on the head, right?
Yeah. So we do have a little bit of time in case there are any questions from the audience.
I have the first one.
All right.
What's churn for the group, Darren?
So that is customers that leave. So if you have like an MRR product, a monthly recurring revenue product, and you have 100 customers, and then you have 90 a month later, and 80 month later, you're churning out 10 customers every month. So if you're entirely focused just on your revenue, for example, maybe your sales team are performing really well and putting 30 new customers in the month, every month. So you're just seeing your customer count go up 20 a month, and you're like, we're killing it. But in the support side or in the product side, you are churning out 10 customers a month. So 10 of those deals that your salespeople do, 33% of their effort is getting flushed down the toilet. So it's the concept of a hole in a bucket. You're pouring water in faster than, but like fix the bucket, the hole in the bucket, and and you're going to be better off in the long term.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Mike, I'm going to give you Don.
Anyone else? Is there anything that maybe within your business is unique and it's okay? Don't be afraid. Ask that question. All right, maybe yeah. Okay.
At 4 o'clock, you have to start paying his hourly consulting rate. So now's the time to ask.
Can we go back to talking about examples of different types of dashboards or visualization tools? We touched a little bit on that.
Like that. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like we talked about churn, right? So seeing churn over time is great. Another really important one, and a lot of people don't do this. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs like, oh yeah, no, we're gonna do 20 new customers next month, and then 30 the month after that, and then 40 the month after that. And it's like, okay, how many are in your funnel right now? Well, I don't know. Well, what's your average time to close? About 4 months. Okay, so you're gonna do 50 deals in November, and on average it takes 4 months. So, and your conversion rate is 1 out of 10, so you should have 180 leads in your funnel, and you have 40? So that's not going to happen. Like there's really simple things, and I think and again, I'm a software person, or I'm selling software, so I think understanding like what is the process? Like what is the process? If you know what I mean when I say a funnel, like so the top of the funnel might be came to your website, and then the next stage may be downloaded a white paper, and then the next one may have been like set a demo, sign up for a demo, and then now they're in the qualified sales leads. Like, what are the conversion rates between that, and what is the time of that journey on average, or is it completely all over the place, right? Understanding those metrics, and then you'll know. That gives you the predictive ability to know. I could say, hey, I know right now I'm not going to hit October's because our funnel's been poor the last 2 months, and it's 4 4-month conversion on average. We'd need to do something, right? Versus if you're totally cash flow focused, it's like halfway through October, you're like, oh, we're like super short. Like you can't do anything about October. You need it's done. Like, so now the best thing you can do is like start saving January, and then if you're burning $80,000 a month and you're only at $20,000 in revenue and you've got $150,000 in the bank, then it's the sooner you know that the plane is flying into the side of a rocky cliff, the more options there are to solve the problem, right? So I think like when you're an early stage business, I think that is one of the most critical things to nail is like, what does the funnel look like? What does that customer journey look like? And then be able to apply measurements to that, so that your marketing department's goals, if there's somebody that's focusing on top of funnel, that qualified marketing lead, that you know that those goals align with that goal. And if this goal is failing, then what are you going to do? What's going to be implemented? Are you going to double down on marketing? Or are you going to add a new type of activity like an outbound sales channel or something like that? Or are you going to raise more money? Or are you going to lay some staff off so you don't have to lay the entire team off in October? Like, I think those are like the dire straits sort of metric piece that I would urge early stage companies that are customer driven like that to really understand that funnel and that's easy stuff. The tools you can use to do that, any quality marketing automation or sales management tool like a Salesforce, they bought Peridot, which is marketing automation. They have a wonderful integration. It's expensive tools, and this stuff is cheap. HubSpot, we use HubSpot because it's kind of like half-assed version of all the things, but it's relatively affordable for the package you get. And then once you have more money, then if your sales are 50 grand, then you probably shouldn't have $100,000 worth of sales tools. So maybe it starts at a spreadsheet and then it graduates to some other tool and then eventually graduates to another level of sophistication as you go. But I think that's the critical one that's going to determine your survivability.
In simple layman's terms, I'm not much of a techie. Data intelligence tracking is mapping, intervention, troubleshooting, innovating, with the objective being enhancing the bottom line. Is that more or less it, or am I off base? Yeah?
You should write that down.
I'm going to go update the Wikipedia page right now. I think, and it starts with having well-managed data, right? Even before you can start asking questions of your data, you need to have it in that kind of state. But yeah, that's at the end of the day, that's you're trying to make better decisions to help that bottom line.
If I'm explaining it to somebody else, if I put it like this, then I think that they would grasp it faster. But I wanted to make sure that I was on track.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
track, literally, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
From maybe Darren can answer my question. This is I sell my products on Amazon.ca and .com, and is it possible that to get it has its own dashboard to give me some information, but I want to know that who is buying my product, what age, women, men, or is it possible to get this information from Amazon, or we need a software to connect to Amazon and get this information? This
Yeah,
is
I mean,
statistic.
honestly, I've never sold to the Amazon platform, so I'm not really sure. I don't believe that they track. I don't believe they track age as a piece of information. I would assume there are probably tools out there that could engage. Like this is where you see like when you're talking earlier about like integrating. They want you to add your Facebook and add all your profiles because that profile data can have things like that. That's why like in the music space, for example, the mobile apps will often say, hey, you need to validate your app with your Facebook, and then you need to scan your wristband identifier on it. So now that I know, because basically like what happens is daddy buys his daughter and her two friends tickets at Coachella, but Coachella doesn't care about daddy. They want the information of the kids that are going there. That's the decision maker. It's daddy's not deciding to buy it. It's dad, please buy us the tickets. So that's who they want to market to. So by getting that ticket, so they get the ticket, now they have the mobile app, now they have the Facebook, now they know how old is this person, what sex is this person, where does this person live, what is their education level, what are their interests, what movies, what music do they like. And then compiling all that data with tracking, the mobile app will track their location, show their geodata, where they're traveling to. The RFID wristbands will then track. So they use that social media integration essentially to get that. So I don't think you would get that right out of Amazon. What I would advise you to do would be to reach out to Amazon and say, hey, here are the things that we would like to know to better use your platform, and see what they tell you. There may be some pieces of information you can access. There may be, and they may be aware of platforms out there. I always watch. I said this thing before, AppSumo. It's this website of new technologies that are going out all the time, and their deals. Like, so people follow AppSumo and get like crazy discounts on products. Like, I would be very surprised with the amount of people that are selling through the Amazon world. And also, I believe there's a form you can go to as an Amazon seller where you can communicate with other sellers and collaborate. And so I would say go to their support, ask the questions directly, go to the community, ask the questions, and I'd be very surprised if through that you didn't find some sort of way that you can dig deeper into the data and integrate other tools to get a more fulfilling data set.
You want to spell the name of that app you're talking about?
AppSumo, AppSumo, I think.
Okay.
I mean, it's just it's a lot of B2B tools, and you can get, I've gotten good products, I've gotten crappy products, but they're cheap, so if you buy something and it's not a lot of money and you don't like it, that's a lot easier than if it is.
One last question, anybody?
Yeah, I have one more.
Thank you. So I just noticed that the idea of business intelligence has come into at least 10 years, a very long time ago. And before, people usually talk about the business intelligence, but now people usually talk about business intelligence and analytics. So it's apparent that people pay much more attention on analytics. But not only for the small business owner, but also for an organization, I find that the data might not be very sufficient enough for people to do the correct and accurate or on-time analytics. And at the same time, most of the spreadsheets that come from the structured data. But for some unstructured data that are available from the internet or some of the other places, it's not very easily to be extracted. Even though there is extract to transform or load data to help us to extract and transform data, but that's also not very easy for people to get or extract those unstructured data into that software. And so what do you think of the BI analytics can help users to address those kind of challenges? Thank you.
So unstructured data, my advice if you have unstructured data is go get yourself some good structured data. But once you've tapped the value of your structured data and you want to look at unstructured data, so when we talk about structured data, we're talking about things like an Excel table or a database table or something where there's labeled fields and I know what every piece of information represents because I have some kind of data model. When I talk about unstructured data, I might mean something like, what are people saying about my company on social media? Yeah. What pictures are people posting of my products on social media? And it's harder to analyze because it's not well organized, it's not well structured, and it's difficult to automate because people are sarcastic and people make jokes and you know, so even just looking at the social media, it can be very difficult to extract the kind of insight out of it that you want. So it is an area that is being a lot of attention is being paid to it. I still wouldn't buy or sell my business on the basis of what I was getting out of unstructured data. I think we're still struggling with that messiness. But some of these tools, especially the really expensive ones, right? So when you get into the Cognos, when you get into the Tableaus, SAP, they're all trying to do something with unstructured data to varying degrees of success. So yes, absolutely, it can help with unstructured data. For most organizations, though, the real value that you're going to find starts with your own structured data. Same thing with big data, lots of talk about big data. You know what, you're still going to find most of your value in your little data. And it's only after you've tapped those things that I'd start sweating the unstructured and the big.
So it sounds like it could be one of those rabbit holes. If you get on it, you might end up spending way too much time trying to figure it out.
I have a friend who works at a company, and they try to deal with this unstructured social media data, and some of the funny things, and just like how do they analyze language?
Yeah.
Like that product is the shit. The system sees shit and product and goes bad, but you know, and then like you think like when you're analyzing data like that. Language is one really hard example because it's the colloquialisms and the changes all the time, expressions and all this way people communicate in emoticons and all this stuff being integrated into it. Like they're really feeling, you know, the people that I know that work in that space feel the constant defeat of when they feel like as soon as they feel like they figured it out, they remind it that it's a moving target.
It's a moving target.
It's kind of like my kids, and when they're talking to me, I think they're giving me a compliment, but they're not.
Well, you know, it's really, I think we have to find a way to use the social media data, though. I mean, and maybe not to analyze it quantitatively, but just to monitor it and recognize the value of it, because it occurred to me very early on when my very first customer was a wine bar here in town, and the owner said to me, "Do you tweet?" And I said, "Well, no." "But I have a Facebook page." No, you've got to tweet." She said, "You have to tweet." I said, "Okay, well, if you say so." So I went home and I set up a Twitter account. It's not that complicated to set it up. And she tweeted about the purchase of my cheese, new cheese. And within 20 minutes, 15 minutes of her tweet going out, I had about 10 or 12 followers on my Twitter account, and they were all chefs. They were all chefs from around town.
Recognized
experts. So there's value in that. You have to kind of monitor it and know what you're looking at, I suppose. But to try and turn it into statistics, I don't know that it's that easy.
Yeah. No,
but there's still a huge amount of value in the information you can draw from the social media.
Great.
I think if you're a company and you're a small company and your social media is so active that you need quantitative programmatic metrics, then you're something really
then
good.
You probably don't need
it.
It's
a good problem to have. Most companies I know, the problem is no one gives a shit about anything social media. So if you have the opposite, you're good.
Well, that's a great note to finish on. I'm getting the signal here that time's almost up. A little bit of a recap, though, what we learned from the outset. Mike, I think you mentioned using tools, people, and strategy to unlock data, and I think we talked a lot about that today. We talked about some of the pitfalls, you know, not overcomplicating things, keeping it simple from the get-go, but starting from the get-go is important. We talked about the importance of iteration. You know, you go from the Post-it note to Excel. Don't be in a hurry to get to that next level. Excel can be quite powerful. Use that until you're really super big, and then you get other problems like social media. We learned the origins of a dashboard. I'm not going to repeat it.
Polite company.
There you go. Know what you're measuring. and it's essential to use your internal data. Sound good? Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. And good luck out there in the data fields.